why are you making me feel like I can I can never be comfortable in the body that I have?
When George Balanchine came to America to establish the foundations of American ballet, he placed thinness on a pedestal and sang of whiteness and collarbones and delicacy. I've never felt at home in an industry whose teachers and consumers prescribe these unattainable standards to my body. Mishandling and misunderstanding of my anatomy have accompanied me throughout my journey in dance, from amateur to pre-professional, obstructing the healing power of my practice. My project is speaking to the women who are most often denied care. I listened to the stories of Black women who work in the professional dance industry, and I used their experiences to drive my choreography. Their words have been carefully crafted into a soundscape that accompanies my piece, similar to what you saw in the beginning of this video. This project is a synthesis of auditory and performative mediums, as well as storytelling in the most intimate sense. It addresses the reading of the Black ballerina's body, a body perennially denied love and care. It's my way of reconciling the loss and the heartbreak, but also embracing the overwhelming joy of what it means to be a Black woman in dance. My name is Bree, and welcome to Black Bones. The primary component of this project is the choreography I developed.
I definitely don't have a specific process I use for choreographing, but the common theme is that I have to feel something. It could be motivation, sadness, anger, what have you, but some emotion needs to be there.
My movement is sort of a blend of classical and contemporary styles.
I sometimes find myself resorting to a more balletic style. So to help me get out of that framework, I'll reference some of my favorite dancers like Michaela Taylor or Juliana Nunez during the creation process.
I think I've now gotten to the point where I shy away from the molds of technical structure and I allow myself to move more freely. The process of conducting the 4 interviews with Caleb, Renako, Sierra, and Kinley was certainly the most fulfilling part of my project. We spent about an hour and a half talking about our upbringings within the dance community. How were we trained? How did our teachers talk to us? How did they interact with us? What kind of things did they say? Were we discouraged? All those conversations were extremely meaningful to me and incredibly insightful. In the latter part of our conversations, we pivoted towards discussing mental health and whether or not these dancers felt like they experienced significant repercussions from their time as practicing dancers. What was most interesting to me was seeing the shared and divergent experiences across the board. Some dancers had extremely different opinions on how their teachers spoke to them and what it meant to them. One dancer I spoke, and I'm going to keep anonymity to protect the vulnerability of my interviewees, but one dancer expressed how the tough love that her teacher gave her motivated her to continue to pursue a professional career. Whereas a different dancer explained that the harsh critique made her question her path. It was very cathartic to share our experiences in this way, and it provided really strong emotional fuel for the creation of this choreography. I took the language that was shared with me. If it was involving the body, I decided to come up with choreography that was very visceral, tugging at the skin and pulling at the chest, at the clothes on my body, to suggest that there's a parallel between the way my body is moving and the words that are being said in the soundtrack. I used this method to construct a narrative for my dance piece that created an overall landscape that hopefully gave the viewer a bit of insight into the types of stories that were shared with me during my interviews.
But if you just step outside of that and just dance with your soul, I think it draws people in.
Their contributions are at the center of my piece. I tried to build a movement narrative that would accurately convey the powerful message we were trying to get across. In an ideal world, the choreography will give the audience member a taste or some semblance of understanding of what it feels like to be a Black woman in dance.
None of this would have been possible without the help of some very important people. So I just want to take a little bit of time to acknowledge that.
My sound designer, Barbara Nerness, has been instrumental for helping me shape my vision and bring it to life. My mentor, Anna, was my rock and my guide throughout this journey and supported me whenever I needed a hand. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to Jessie, who gave me the opportunity to make this art. None of it would have been possible without her, and I couldn't be more grateful. There are a couple of different disciplines interacting in this project, so we're going to take some time to walk through them and discuss how they relate to the work and also to each other. But before we start, I'm just going to set the stage a little bit and tell you about myself. I am a human biology major concentrating in the neurological basis of disease. So I'm really interested in how our brains operate and the various ways that they function and malfunction. I've spent most of my undergraduate career reading papers in scientific journals, so I'm very familiar with clinical research. But what does clinical research really tell us? Let's explore that a little bit more. The process of performing experiments or retrospectively collecting data from medical records is singular in the sense that it doesn't go beyond the boundaries of the specified scientific discipline. For example, if you're doing research in the psychiatry field, you're restricted to using the tools in that field and often don't get to explore other relevant issues. In the analysis phase, researchers use equations and statistical tools to summarize the data. And finally comes the interpretation of results, which is an analytical rather than an emotional process. So when we take clinical research, this logical, single-disciplinary tool, to understand an issue like mental health in dancers, we're confronted with this idea that we're getting a calculated assessment of the situation simply due to the nature of clinical studies. Here's an example. This is a journal article published in the Journal of Dance Medicine and Science. It shows us some interesting data, like how 13.5% of the dancers in the study population experience self-oriented perfectionism. Clinical research has its benefits. It's taught me to think methodically and to explore all possible data streams to find the solution for an answer. I really value clinical research because it's enabled me to explore really interesting topics in a rigorous manner in the past. And I believe that it will really benefit me as a physician in the future. Having that understanding of how numbers work and how to use statistical tools and how to interrogate questions using the scientific method is of the utmost importance for scientific inquiry. However, there are some limitations.
How can we extract empathy or understanding from numbers on a page? To address this conflict, my project uses performance ethnography, which is a very different form of research. Judith Hamera explains that performance ethnography gives us a new vocabulary to explore the expressive element of culture, with a focus on embodiment as a crucial component for cultural analysis.
One of Hamera's driving points was looking at performance ethnography as doing of critical theory, to honor the tradition of and ongoing commitments to investment in interrogating what often passes for the conventional wisdom.
Exploring these questions in this way allows us to investigate, as Hamera puts it, what is and what can be. This is really important for my project because now I have access to the subjunctive dimension of performance to reimagine what it means to be a Black woman in dance. I can go beyond the numbers of clinical data and use the embodiment of narrative and oral history to share what I want to share. And this has really important implications for how our brains will interpret the information as well. Without getting too complicated, we're going to take a closer look at what's happening in our brains. When we look at the numbers and statistics in complicated analyses presented in a clinical research paper, our brains are using our prefrontal cortexes located in the front of our head to analyze the information.
And so this area of the brain is a highly evolved structure, and it really makes us human. It gives us our characteristic problem-solving skills, logical processing, decision-making, and a host of other higher cognitive functions that we associate with humankind. I love the structure of the brain. It keeps me on my toes and helps me get through my day. But unfortunately, there's a little bit of a disconnect from the emotional parts of our brain when we use the prefrontal cortex. If we want to activate our primal emotions like fear, sadness, joy, hatred, that is a structure, or rather a series of structures located much deeper, buried within our cortex. And it involves a system called the limbic system. Some of these structures include the hypothalamus and the amygdala. And some of our common neurotransmitters that we see communicating with neurons there are serotonin, dopamine, etc. These neurotransmitters are really important for helping us feel the emotions I described earlier.
When I was thinking about creating this project, I wanted to communicate data in a way that would make the audience feel something. And performance ethnography allows me to do that. I took the information from these interviews. I gathered the data in a rigorous manner by following the same sorts of questions and using similar processes. And I collected this data and I decided to make a dance with it. When the viewer is watching my dance unfold, they are activating the limbic system. The visceral feelings that they engage with when watching my performance tells them to feel joy, tells them to feel sad, tells them to feel any number of emotions that they might feel. And I think the most fascinating part of it is that the limbic system interacts very closely with our hippocampus, which is the region of the brain that stores our memories. And so when we engage with information in a more emotionally impactful way, we solidify our memories within the context of that emotion, which makes it much easier to retain in the future. So I've landed on this really special combination of science and art. I'm comfortable and familiar with clinical research and neuroscience and how our brains work. And I was able to use that knowledge to inform my learning of a new artistic discipline, performance ethnography. I think I've found a great way to tackle these really important topics for me personally, how Black women are treated and how they feel being in the professional dance industry, by combining these multi-layered assessments of information.
To conclude, I'm going to just talk about why I decided to do this project and why now. During the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, I saw a lot of famous dance companies in America taking a really thoughtful, introspective look at the flaws embedded within their system.
I was inspired by this pretty significant step towards enhancing equality within the dance industry, but I felt as though questions were being asked and no one was answering them. I feel that the industry is ready to recognize Black artists, Black women specifically, and tell them that they belong. They need to be there in the industry. There's space held for them. And I am trying to take up that space by talking to these Black artists and by performing myself. It's the perfect time to celebrate Black artistry and specifically Black dance artistry. So I wanted to take that opportunity. The main question that's driving my research is, what does it mean to be a Black woman in dance? It's been the consistent theme. But I'm also curious as to how we can start to think critically about the physical and mental hardships placed on Black women in the dance industry and why they're present in the first place. This goes all the way back to the foundations of American ballet established by Balanchine when he first came to America. As stated in my artist statement, he placed thinness and whiteness on a pedestal, and teachers and consumers alike decided to make that the standard. Automatically, a host of bodies were barred access from this very beautiful art form. The industry has made a bit of progress, offering positions of principal dancer to individuals like Misty Copeland, who absolutely defies the standard ballet body expectation. But still, we see young dancers, young Black dancers being told to get breast reductions, to get rid of their hips, that their legs are too thick, that their feet are too flat. They're being told these things, and therefore, there's no place for them with Black leotards and pink tights. There's no place for them in the ballet or contemporary ballet or professional hip-hop industry. And so this project is doing a small part in exploring why that starts to develop. In my conversations with these women, I learned a lot about how teachers feel entitled to share these things because that's what they were taught. They were also told to be insecure about their body. It's a generational handing down of extremely derogatory remarks and traumatic experiences that really should not be involved in such a joyful art form. In the future, I'm really hoping that titans of the dance industry, those that are controlling admission and rejection into the dance industry space, feel more open-minded about hearing this information and really thinking, okay, how are our actions, how are the systems currently set in place impacting our dancers? I'm imagining a future that has more diverse and beautiful bodies on stage with more stories that can be told. My dance journey has been wild. I'm not going to say that this gift that I've been given of being a dancer didn't come without very heavy costs, but I wouldn't give it up for the world. Dance is my magic. Dance is my superpower. Dance makes up all of me. And Black Bones is my way of sharing a little bit of that power with all of you. Thanks.